Welcome to Dialogue.
It's good to be here. We have a really crucial deep dive today. We're going to try and get under the hood of what is, I think, maybe the most influential architecture of the 21st century.
And that's social media.
That's social media. For so
Right.
many people, it's a set of apps, right? It's a place you go to see photos or, see what your cousin is up to.
And that's exactly the idea we want to push back on today. Our whole mission here is to look so far beyond the surface, beyond the trending topics, the viral videos, or the latest influencer drama.
Right.
We're treating social media not as like a bunch of different apps, but as what our sources are calling a global architecture.
And that word architecture is so important. When you call something an architecture, you're saying it's not just a tool. It's not a hammer.
No.
It's a foundational structure. It's the building we're all living inside of. And this architecture is actively, shaping our identity. It's dictating politics. It's changing economies. And maybe most profoundly, it's conditioning how we think and how we relate to each other.
So that's where we're going. We're aiming for those deeper layers, the ones that are usually hidden by the infinite scroll. We're talking about the behavioral psychology, the hard-coded design, the massive economic engines powering it all.
And of course, the social consequences, the really big, often disruptive consequences that kind of define what it means to be alive right now in this digital age.
It just feels like such a necessary conversation to have, because if you keep treating these things as neutral tools,
You miss the entire point. You fail to see that they are, by their very design, engineered environments. They're built for very specific outcomes.
which are what?
The optimization of your engagement and ultimately the modification of your behavior.
Okay, so let's get right into that. Let's unpack this idea of an engineered environment. This is part one. Social media as an engineered environment.
Mhm.
And the thesis, like you said, is that these aren't neutral. They are behavior architectures. So where does that engineering even begin?
It begins with some pretty basic science, actually,
Yeah.
specifically behavioral psychology. These platforms aren't just engaging by accident. They are fundamentally addictive because they draw on decades of research into reinforcement.
Right.
The central mechanism that makes the entire thing tick is something called intermittent variable rewards.
Okay, so this is the famous slot machine analogy. I think a lot of people have heard that term, but maybe don't fully get why the intermittent part is the secret sauce. Why is that unpredictability so powerful?
Because predictability is boring. It kills engagement. If every single time you checked your phone you had, say, 3 new likes, your brain would just habituate to that. It would go from being an exciting check-in to just a chore.
It's expected. There's no surprise.
No surprise. The system relies on the deep-seated fact that your brain is a novelty-seeking machine. It's hardwired to hunt for high-value, unpredictable rewards.
So the engineers are deliberately avoiding a fixed reward schedule. They don't want you to know you'll get one good post every 5 minutes.
Exactly. They want the reward, that little hit of validation or a funny video or a message from a friend, to feel possible at any moment, but completely unpredictable in its timing and its size.
And you can see it in the design itself.
Oh, it's everywhere. The infinite scroll, which never ends, it always promises that the next thing could be amazing. The little red notification badge, it glows, but it doesn't tell you if it's life-changing news or just spam.
And that action, the physical act of pulling down to refresh your feed,
That's you pulling the slot machine lever.
wow.
You are kicking off a process where the outcome is governed entirely by probability, not by your effort. And that variable schedule is so much more powerful for creating compulsive behavior than a fixed one.
And it's the dopamine hit, right?
Well, it's more subtle than that. The dopamine is actually released in anticipation of the reward, not just from the reward itself. It's the what if that gets you. That sustained anticipation is what traps you in the loop, checking and checking all day long. It's a masterpiece of psychological engineering.
It's fascinating and, frankly, a little terrifying. And the engineering doesn't just stop there at the conditioning. It gets deeper into exploiting our basic cognitive functions. Let's talk about that. Exploiting cognitive science. What biases are these platforms built to amplify?
The algorithms basically act as giant amplifiers for our brain's built-in flaws. We can focus on 4 really key ones. The first is salience bias.
Okay, what's that?
It just means that human attention is naturally drawn to things that are dramatic, loud, shocking, or visually stunning. The algorithms know this. They know that if something is highly salient, it dramatically increases the odds of a click, a share, or just you stopping your scroll for a few seconds.
So let's say I post a really detailed, nuanced, 1,000-word analysis of something important, and someone else posts a shocking picture with, a 2-sentence, highly emotional caption.
Picture will win.
Every single time.
Every time. And that leads you right into the second bias, which is negativity bias. Study after study shows that emotionally charged content, especially stuff that makes you feel anger, fear, or outrage, spreads way, way faster than content that's calm, positive, or, reasonable.
Hold on. So if the system's goal is just to maximize engagement, and if anger and fear get the most engagement, then the platform isn't just a mirror reflecting conflict that's already out there. It's structurally incentivizing it. It's monetizing it.
That is the absolute core insight. Outrage is incredibly profitable. The system selects for content that generates emotional arousal, and conflict is the cheapest, easiest, and fastest way to get that arousal. It turns our screens into these perpetual outrage machines, no matter what the company's mission statement says about connecting the world.
Wow. Okay, and then we have social comparison bias. This one feels like it's a uniquely painful trap, especially on the more visual platforms.
It's just so deeply human. We are wired to measure ourselves against our peers to figure out where we stand. But these platforms, they don't show you your peers. They show you highly filtered, professionally lit, perfectly curated versions of other people's lives.
So you're in this endless demoralizing game of comparing your messy, complex internal reality to their perfectly polished external persona.
Yes. And the bias makes you constantly feel like you're not good enough, which then drives you back to the platform for two reasons. Either to consume more of that aspirational content or to try and perfect your own online identity even further. It's a vicious cycle.
And the last one is confirmation bias. We all kind of know that algorithms feed us what we want to see, but what are the actual structural consequences of being in that kind of closed loop?
The structural consequences, I think, the erosion of critical thinking. The algorithm learns what you believe, and then it just serves you a constant stream of content that confirms those beliefs while actively filtering out anything that might challenge you.
It keeps you comfortable.
It does more than that. It creates these sealed-off loops of thought. You can literally exist inside a reality bubble where everything you see tells you you're right, which makes any encounter with a different viewpoint feel not just wrong, but aggressive or even incomprehensible.
So the architecture doesn't just hook our attention, it actively polarizes how we see the world. Which brings us to the physical constraints. The interface limits thought. It's not just the content, it's the very shape of the box you're typing into.
Absolutely. One of our sources puts it perfectly. The form decides the thought. If the format demands brevity, speed, and high emotion, then what gets penalized?
Complexity, nuance, deliberation.
All of it. A 280-character tweet is, by its nature, incapable of holding the complexity of a well-researched paragraph. A 60-second video can't be a structured, evidence-based argument.
So if you try to debate, I don't know, climate policy or constitutional law in these formats, the whole thing just collapses into slogans and emotional jabs.
It has to. And that has this really profound downstream effect on our public discourse. Anything that can't be said easily, briefly, and emotionally just tends not to be said at all.
So we're collectively losing the muscle for complex thought.
We are. The scope of what our society can even discuss is shrinking to fit inside the tiny box of an app interface.
And all of this engineering, the compulsive loops, the bias amplification, the shrinking of thought, it's all driven by one thing: platform economics. Let's break down that relentless economic model.
It's actually brutally simple, and it's something you should keep in mind through this whole deep dive. It's a three-step process. Step 1, capture attention. Use every psychological trick in the book to keep the user on the platform.
Yeah?
Step 2, translate that attention into data. Every scroll, every click, how long you linger on a photo, your emotional reactions, it's all harvested, categorized, and analyzed.
And step 3,
convert that data into profit, mostly through hyper-targeted advertising, but increasingly it's about selling predictions of your future behavior to whoever will pay.
so the second that attention becomes the main commodity, the entire architecture just naturally evolves to maximize that one thing, and it doesn't really care about the social cost. There's no metric for societal well-being.
There isn't. And that's the really scary part of the economic logic. The system just evolves toward whatever maximizes engagement time, even if the byproduct of that is a more polarized, anxious, and fragmented society. If outrage brings in revenue, the architecture will systematically select for outrage.
That is a perfect setup for the system itself.
Yeah.
But we aren't just robots responding to these inputs. We are complex people. We bring our own needs, our own intentions to the screen. So in part 2, let's flip to the users and their diverse intents. The analysis suggests our motivations map onto these much broader human needs.
That's a crucial pivot to make. Users are not a monolith. They log on to fulfill a whole range of basic human needs. Sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they fail spectacularly.
The sources break this down into 6 categories of motivation, and they stress that these are fluid. You can be all of these in the span of 10 minutes.
Exactly, you shift between modes.
So let's start with the first one, the identity curators. This group is all about self-presentation and validation.
Yeah, their core project online is to construct and maintain a persona. They are performing a version of themselves, an aspirational self, really, that is optimized to get external approval. Their goal is to shape how people see them, to feel like they belong, and, crucially, to get that validation in the form of likes, shares, followers.
Which are basically just quantifiable proof of their social worth.
Pretty much. It's a performance where the audience's reaction determines your self-worth, and it connects right back to that social comparison trap we talked about. They feel this immense pressure to perform an idealized life, no matter how exhausting it is behind the scenes.
Right. Contrast that with the second group, the social participants. This feels like the original promise of these platforms.
It is. This is about replicating your existing offline relationships online. Their motivation is simple maintenance of social bonds. They use the platform as a utility to stay up to date with friends, family, colleagues.
So it's about reducing friction in communication.
Exactly. They are way less focused on validation from strangers and much more focused on simple connection. You'll often find them using private groups and direct messages more than the public feed.
Okay, then we have the information foragers. This role seems to have gotten incredibly complicated as platforms have sort of eaten the traditional news industry.
It's so complicated. Their motivation is to reduce uncertainty. They want to stay informed, they treat their feed as a news source, and they want to get that information fast. But here's the paradox that the sources point out.
The very platforms they're using for news are optimized for speed and engagement, not for accuracy.
Exactly. So this just accelerates the spread of misinformation, disinformation. It makes the knowledge they get really shallow, sometimes toxic, and ultimately it makes the uncertainty they were trying to solve even worse.
So they're stuck in a system that is fundamentally hostile to what they actually want. They want truth, but the architecture serves them profitable noise.
That's the trap. Now, let's talk about the people who are intentionally using the platform for work. The economic actors.
The creators, the entrepreneurs, the people building brands, the ones trying to monetize attention.
They see the platform as a workplace. Their motivation is to convert attention into money. They're engaged in what's become a totally legitimized form of digital labor. They are explicitly working to please the platform's metrics, maximizing views, optimizing for demographics, building a brand they can leverage.
They're the ones supplying the content that feeds the whole machine.
They are. Then we shift gears to a more emotional use of the platform with the escapists.
I think we've all been in this category.
Oh, absolutely. They're looking for entertainment, for distraction, for psychological relief. They're trying to regulate their emotions. They're bored, they're stressed, they're anxious, so they turn to the feed for a quick brain break.
And the key observation here is that social media kind of inherited this role from TV, but it wasn't really designed for it.
Right. And because it's optimized for addiction, not just entertainment, it provides this temporary relief, but often reinforces the cycle of compulsive use. You scroll to feel better, but you end up feeling worse an hour later.
I know. I definitely fall into that mode on a Friday afternoon. The second I feel my energy dip, my thumb just instinctively goes for the app icon. I'm not looking for connection, just pure mindless distraction.
That is the intended reflex. And finally, we have this massive, but mostly silent group, the observers.
The passive consumers.
Yes. Their motivation is to experience everything without actually participating in the performance. They consume a huge amount of content, they watch the curators, they scroll through the news, they enjoy the escapist stuff, but they rarely create, comment, or share.
The source material calls this a silent social existence.
It's a great phrase. They provide the raw attention, the raw data that fuels the entire system, but you almost never see them in the public feed.
And what's so important for you listening to this to remember is that you are probably all 6 of these people. It just depends on the time of day, how you're feeling, which app you open. These are fluid psychological states, not fixed identities.
And understanding that distinction is the first step toward using these platforms more intentionally. It helps you shift from saying, ugh, I'm wasting time on Instagram, to asking, okay, I'm currently using this in an escapist mode. Maybe I should be using it as a social participant instead.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. Okay, so now let's slip the perspective again. We've seen the complex motivations of the users, but in part 3, we have to ask, What do the platforms want? Because the systems themselves have these very narrow, very powerful, and relentless logics driving them.
And this huge contrast between the complexity of the users and the simplicity of the platforms, that's the engine of the whole digital dilemma we're in. We can break this down into three systemic logics, starting with the foundation: economic logic, surveillance capitalism.
That sounds a lot more invasive than just, selling a few ads.
It is. The term, which was coined by Shoshana Zuboff, describes a mechanism where platforms are harvesting these just massive, unprecedented amounts of user data. And it's not just to show you an ad for something you might buy today.
It's to predict your future behavior.
Precisely. The core value they offer to their clients, whether corporate or political, is predictability.
So the goal isn't just to sell me a pair of shoes. The goal is to make me a predictable consumer, a predictable voter, a predictable thinker, so my future actions can be guaranteed and sold.
That's it exactly. The more accurately the platform can forecast your next emotional trigger, or your shift in political thinking, or your next big purchase, the more valuable you become as a data asset. The system is actively shaping you into a predictable pattern.
So my behavior isn't just being recorded, it's an output that the system is trying to optimize.
Yes. And that optimization is driven entirely by software, which brings us to the computational logic. Algorithmic governance. We need to get into the engine room and really understand what the algorithm is doing to govern our reality.
The sources break this down into 4 core functions that are always running. Let's start with the first one, prioritization.
This is the selection function. The algorithm decides what you see, the order you see it in, and critically, when you see it. It's dictating the relative importance of everything in your perceived world. You might have 1,000 friends, but the algorithm picks the 3 pieces of content it thinks will maximize your engagement, effectively governing your window onto reality.
Okay, the second function is classification. This seems to feed directly into that economic goal of predictability.
It does. Classification is the sorting mechanism. The system needs to put you in a box. It needs to know if you're a likely new home buyer or a highly engaged political donor in this demographic. These labels are constantly being refined based on your behavior to create more and more accurate predictive models.
They need those boxes to make the predictions later on, which is the third function, prediction.
Prediction is the forecast. It's the algorithm trying to guess what specific piece of content will keep you scrolling, watching, or commenting for the longest possible time. Prediction is the engine of profit because that sustained attention is the commodity they're selling.
But it's this fourth function, modification, where the line between just predicting what you'll do and actually controlling what you do gets really blurry. How is modification different from prediction?
Prediction says, based on your past behavior, I predict you will watch this video for 3 minutes. Modification is so much more invasive. Modification is the system adjusting your content now in order to steer your future behavior. It's not just guessing what you will do, it's actively tweaking your environment to make you do what it wants based on its own goals.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's say a company wants to sell a new running shoe. The platform's modification logic might start subtly nudging you. It might show you a little more content about fitness or maybe about outdoor trails or sustainable fashion just to prime you, to make you more receptive to that shoe ad when it finally appears in 2 days. It's like a massive, silent A/B test running on your psyche.
And they measure what works.
Constantly. They might test thousands of these micro-modifications at once, and if one particular sequence of content makes a group of users 3% more likely to click an ad, that modification gets baked into the system for that user type. That is behavioral control.
That is a chilling distinction. And when you combine all 4, prioritization, classification, prediction, and modification, the system really does act like this invisible decentralized government.
Which leads to the critical analysis in the source material. This whole setup is a form of governance without democracy. These are computational rules that are shaping our society, that are dictating public opinion and modifying individual behavior. But they operate with zero transparency, no user consent about the goals, and certainly no democratic oversight.
That's a huge claim. And the stakes get even higher when we look at the last logic, socio-political logic. Attention sovereignty. What are these platforms ultimately competing against?
They're competing against the biggest, most established institutions in human history. We're talking about governments, educational systems, even religions.
For what?
For influence over the identity and the worldview of the individual. Historically, those institutions provided the stories that gave society coherence. Now, for billions of people, algorithms are the primary source of moral, political, and cultural guidance.
So their power, their sovereignty isn't based on land or natural resources.
No. Their sovereignty is over the ultimate finite resource of the 21st century: attention. If a platform commands your attention, which is zero-sum, you can't give it to two things at once. They command your identity, they command your politics, they command your wallet. The great battle for power today is a battle for the human base.
Okay, we've laid out the mechanics and the cold, hard logic of the system. In part 4, we have to confront the social consequences of living inside this architecture. And these aren't just minor annoyances. These are fundamental shifts in the human experience.
Yeah, we've identified 5 major areas where the system's logic really clashes with human well-being. Let's start at the most personal level: identity and selfhood.
And the core shift here seems to be this externalization of identity.
That's it. We're shifting from building our sense of self internally, from our values, our experiences, our authentic feelings, to becoming a witness to our own lives, performing for this imagined and often critical audience. Our sense of self now needs constant external validation to feel real.
The self becomes a project for public approval.
Exactly. And that performance creates some really specific and harmful psychological outcomes. The analysis lists 4 big ones. First, increased self-consciousness, because you always feel like you're being watched. Second, a reduced tolerance for imperfection, because the online persona has to be flawless to win the validation game.
And a split between your real self and your online self.
Yes, a chronic dissociation that leads to a feeling of fragmentation. And fourth, the one we've touched on, the structural result of all this comparison: chronic inadequacy.
That constant comparison loop is just built into the architecture. You are constantly shown unattainable ideals, which guarantees that you're always measuring your messy, real life against someone else's highlight reel. It's inadequacy by design.
And then we scale up to the collective level: collective behavior and polarization. We know the negativity bias is at play, but how does the system turn basic disagreement into total societal fragmentation?
It creates this self-reinforcing feedback loop. The algorithms prioritize emotionally charged content, and conflict is the most reliable generator of that emotion.
So the inevitable result is that social groups get fragmented into these increasingly insulated echo chambers.
And these chambers aren't just, accidental clubs of like-minded people. They're algorithmically reinforced containers.
That's the key. Since different views are filtered out, the beliefs inside the chamber just get more and more extreme, which fuels this deep antagonism toward anyone in a different chamber.
And here's the most chilling insight from the sources on this. Polarization is not a failure of the system's design.
No. It is an emergent property of an engagement-driven system.
It's the optimal outcome for the business model.
It is. The architecture doesn't accidentally make people fight. It's optimized to generate the intense, high-arousal engagement that conflict provides. When users are arguing, they're on the platform longer, producing more data, generating more profit. The system is working perfectly when society is tearing itself apart.
So every angry comment thread is a profit center.
Wow.
Okay, let's talk about the knowledge crisis. Information disorder.
The fundamental problem here is just speed. The velocity of information, driven by the platform's need for constant newness, just consistently outpaces our ability to verify it, to fact-check it, to add context.
Right. If a piece of sensational fake news can reach 1 million people in 5 minutes, but it takes 2 hours for a fact-checker to debunk it,
The truth has already lost the race. The lie is halfway around the world.
and this leads to this proliferation of really shallow knowledge, where people know a lot of little facts but have no context, alongside just straight-up misinformation and disinformation.
And the really profound consequence of that is that truth itself becomes decentralized and negotiable. It depends on which echo chamber you're in. My truth about a public health crisis or a political event can be completely, totally different from the truth held by someone in a different information bubble.
And that fracture of a shared reality makes collective action, civic trust. Makes it almost impossible.
It does, and this overwhelming environment leads us right to mental health. The sources are very clear that these platforms don't just correlate with mental health issues, they actively intensify them.
What are the main ones?
We can list them off. Increased anxiety, amplified loneliness despite being so connected, intense envy from the social comparison, and really significant attention dysregulation. It's harder for people to focus. And of course, the development of addictive behavior patterns.
Now, a lot of critics frame this as an individual failing. People just need to have more self-control. Put your phone down.
And that just completely misses the point. We have to reinforce the system perspective here.
It's unfair to just blame the user.
It's totally unfair because these issues are not arising because people are inherently weak. They're arising because the systems themselves are psychologically powerful and incredibly strong. They are engineered by thousands of the world's smartest people to exploit our deepest evolutionary vulnerabilities, our need for connection, our fear of being left out, our craving for that variable reward.
When a powerful, optimized system meets a vulnerable human brain, the system is going to win most of the time.
Almost always without conscious intervention or regulation.
Part 5 has to be about moving toward a more conscious digital society. We have to acknowledge, we can't go back to a pre-digital world. That's impossible. But adapting consciously seems essential.
Adaptation is the word. It's the necessary next step in our evolution. We have to stop being these passive objects of the system's logic and start engaging as active, informed participants who have actually read the operating manual.
So let's lay out the key principles for that transition, starting with the individual. The first is digital self-awareness.
This is the first and most critical adaptation. Just understanding how the platforms are designed to shape your behavior, knowing about variable rewards, recognizing when negativity bias is hooking you. That's the first step in reducing their automatic power over you. It's about auditing where your own attention is going.
And once you have that awareness, you can move to the next principle, intentional use.
This means shifting your engagement from an emotional reflex like, scrolling out of boredom, to using the platforms for a specific, deliberate purpose. Before you open the app, you have to ask yourself, why am I opening this right now? Am I trying to connect with a specific person? Am I looking for a specific piece of information? Or am I just trying to escape an uncomfortable feeling?
And by forcing that question, you short-circuit the addictive loop. If you have a goal, you achieve it, and then you leave.
Exactly. Intentionality creates friction, and friction is the enemy of the compulsive loop. But, individual awareness can only get us so far. We need systemic change, which starts with algorithmic transparency.
This gets back to that idea of governance without democracy.
It does. We need to be advocating for policies that require users to know why they're being shown a specific piece of content. If this computational logic is prioritizing and modifying our behavior, we deserve to see the rulebook. We need to know the principles behind the prioritization.
And then we have to teach people how to live in this new reality through a much more rigorous approach to digital literacy.
Literacy in the 21st century can't just be about reading and writing anymore. It has to include a whole new set of critical skills for this environment. Things like advanced source evaluation, how to vet information that's moving at the speed of light.
And consuming things critically. Recognizing when your emotions are being manipulated.
Yes, and crucially, building emotional resilience. Teaching people how to cope with the psychological pressures of constant comparison and engineered conflict.
And the final, and maybe most important shift we need, is in our collective conversation. Platform accountability.
This is a fundamental societal pivot. We have to move the focus away from user responsibility, which is basically just blaming the victim for getting addicted or polarized, and move it toward system responsibility.
Because the evidence shows the architecture itself is the problem.
The architecture is incredibly powerful, and the negative outcomes are emergent properties of its design. So the architecture itself needs to be regulated. The burden can't just be on the individuals who are struggling to navigate this incredibly manipulative environment.
So when we put it all together, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've gone from the slot machine design, through all the different ways we use these platforms, up to the logic of algorithmic governance, and down to the fragmentation of our society.
The synthesis, I think, is this. Social media is not a toy we can just put away. It's a fundamental, powerful, and probably permanent evolutionary force. It's a new global architecture. And we as a species just haven't fully adapted to its mechanics yet, and that mismatch is causing all this friction.
But awareness, that digital self-awareness you talked about, that's the first adaptation. You have to be able to see the environment for what it is. It's an engineered space. And only then can you start to consciously reclaim your autonomy inside it.
And this kind of conversation, this dialogue, is hopefully a step in that direction. It's about building a collective understanding so we can navigate this new world consciously instead of just being passively steered by its hidden, profit-driven logic.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video.